Have you ever wondered why some individuals glide effortlessly through the highest echelons of power and prosperity, while others, possessing equal or even superior talents, grind their lives away in the desolate, unseen valleys of mediocrity? The distinction does not lie in the arbitrary distribution of luck or the whims of fate. Nor is it found in the raw accumulation of academic intelligence. The dividing line between the triumphant and the defeated is drawn by a single, profoundly misunderstood art, the mastery of persuasion. The world operates on a hidden currency, one that predates gold and outlasts empires. That currency is the ability to sell. To the untrained eye, selling is a vulgar transaction of goods for coin, a necessary evil relegated to traveling peddlers and desperate merchants. But pull back the veil of human history. Examine the titans who have shaped civilization, and a startling truth emerges. Every great leader, every visionary creator, every individual who has ever wrested their desires from the unyielding grip of the world was, at their core, a master salesperson. They did not merely exchange physical commodities, they trafficked in beliefs, visions, and the invisible architecture of human motivation. The narrative of human triumph is the narrative of the pitch. Consider the desperate landscapes of the Great Depression, a time when the very lifeblood of the global economy had congealed into a frozen block of panic and despair. Millions wandered the streets, their heads bowed, offering their labor to a world that violently rejected them. They approached the iron gates of industry with a fundamental, catastrophic flaw in their psychology. They were asking, begging, hoping for a wage. They were trying to extract value without first planting the seeds of desire. Contrast this mass tragedy with the archetype of the strategic individual, the one who navigated this economic apocalypse not as a beggar, but as a sovereign architect of value. This individual did not stand in breadlines holding a placard of their needs. Instead, they retreated into the laboratory of their own mind. They observed a dying company, analyzed its hemorrhaging margins, and formulated a precise, calculated strategy to reverse the losses. When this individual finally approached the austere, exhausted president of that failing enterprise, they did not ask for a job. They presented a salvation. They unrolled a blueprint of profit, demonstrating exactly how their specialized personal services would generate wealth far exceeding whatever salary they might eventually command. They bypassed the human resources departments, the skeptical gatekeepers, and the overwhelming statistics of unemployment, speaking directly to the most primal motive of the business owner, the desperate desire for financial preservation and gain. The profound lesson embedded in this historical crucible is that value is never inherent, it is perceived. And perception must be engineered. The men and women who starved during the Depression possessed the same muscles and the same time as those who thrived. But they failed to package their labor into a compelling proposition. They misunderstood the fundamental law of human exchange. No one acts out of charity for the seller, they act exclusively out of self-interest. The master of life understands that to acquire anything, whether it is a paycheck, a promotion, a political office, or the affection of a romantic partner, one must first meticulously construct a scenario where the buyer feels they are the absolute victor in the exchange. The tragedy of the common worker is the belief that their mere existence and willingness to toil entitles them to a living. The truth, harsh and unyielding, is that the world owes nothing to anyone. The individual must forge their own key to the vault of opportunity by identifying what the world fiercely desires and positioning themselves as the sole, indispensable provider of that exact solution. To witness this principle operating at the absolute zenith of power, one must step into the opulent, smoke-filled dining room of the University Club in New York at the dawn of the 20th century. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, roasted canvasback ducks, and the invisible, suffocating weight of unimaginable wealth. Seated at the head of the table was J.P. Morgan, the terrifying, bulbous-nosed emperor of American finance, a man whose mere frown could crash the stock market. Surrounding him were the hardened, cynical barons of the industrial age, men who had seen every trick, heard every pitch, and dismissed 1,000 dreamers. Into this lion's den stepped Charles M. Schwab, a charismatic, energetic executive from Carnegie Steel. Schwab was not there to sell a few tons of iron, he was there to sell a revolution. He was tasked with convincing the most ruthless financiers on earth to part with hundreds of millions of dollars to consolidate the fragmented, chaotic steel industry into a single, colossal behemoth, the United States Steel Corporation. For 90 mesmerizing minutes, Schwab did not rely on dry statistics or tedious balance sheets. He painted a sweeping, technicolor masterpiece of the future. He spoke with a voice that vibrated with absolute, unshakable conviction. He dismantled the archaic inefficiencies of the current system and erected, in the minds of his listeners, a gleaming empire of streamlined production, global dominance, and unprecedented, astronomical profits. He appealed to their greed. Yes, but more importantly, he appealed to their ego, their desire to be the architects of a new world order. He made the creation of this megacorporation seem not merely profitable, but inevitable and historically necessary. When Schwab finally concluded his orchestration of words, a heavy silence fell over the room. J.P. Morgan, the immovable mountain of finance, leaned forward and asked a few pointed questions. Schwab answered them with the precision of a master fencer. Morgan then uttered the words that would change the course of industrial history: "If you can get a price, I will take it." The analysis of Schwab's triumph reveals the anatomy of a perfect sale. Exposing the hidden psychological levers that govern all human decisions, Schwab did not sell steel, he sold a vision of supremacy. The lesson learned is that the master salesperson never focuses on the features of their product, but entirely on the transformation it offers the buyer. Furthermore, Schwab's success rested on his absolute mastery of his own internal state. Before he convinced Morgan, he had to completely and utterly convince himself. He possessed what is known as controlled enthusiasm, a highly infectious, almost hypnotic energy that bypasses the logical defenses of the listener and resonates directly with their emotional core. People are not moved by reason, they are moved by emotion. And they use reason only after the fact to justify their emotional surrender. Schwab understood the basic motives that drive all human action, and he played upon the desire for financial gain, the desire for power, and the desire to build a lasting legacy like a virtuoso playing a flawless instrument. He demonstrated that the size of the request does not dictate the difficulty of the sale. Asking for $500 million is no different than asking for 10 cents. Provided the value proposition perfectly aligns with the buyer's deepest, most unarticulated desires. But the journey of the master salesperson begins long before they ever face a prospect like J.P. Morgan. It begins in the solitary confinement of their own mind. The narrative of ultimate success is intrinsically linked to the mastery of auto-suggestion, the process by which an individual literally programs their own subconscious mind. Consider the aspiring professional who wakes up every morning paralyzed by the fear of rejection. Their mind is a turbulent ocean of doubt, replaying past failures and anticipating future humiliations. This individual cannot sell their way through life because their internal reality is already bankrupt. The archetype of the victor, however, approaches their mind as a sacred, heavily guarded fortress. They understand that the subconscious cannot distinguish between a real event and a vividly imagined one. Therefore, they engage in the rigorous, daily ritual of mental conditioning. They stand before the mirror of their own consciousness and feed it a strict diet of courage, certainty, and success. They visualize the successful conclusion of their endeavors with such hallucinatory clarity that their nervous system reacts as if the victory has already been secured. They build an aura of inevitability around themselves. This invisible armor shields them from the inevitable rejections, the slammed doors, and the cruel indifference of the marketplace. When they finally step out into the world, they are not seeking validation, they are radiating authority. The prospect feels this unseen pressure. They sense that they are dealing with an individual who does not desperately need their approval, but who is offering them a rare opportunity to align with an unstoppable force. This internal psychological alchemy is the most critical and most neglected phase of selling one's way through life. The lesson here is that you can never sell to another human being a belief that you do not hold with absolute, terrifying certainty yourself. Your doubts will leak through your micro-expressions, your tone of voice, and your body language, instantly sabotaging the transaction. The master understands that confidence is not a gift bestowed by the gods, it is a synthetic emotion. manufactured through the deliberate, relentless repetition of positive auto-suggestion. By taking conscious control of the thoughts allowed to germinate in the subconscious, the individual alters their very frequency of existence. They transition from the role of a beggar pleading for a transaction to the role of a benefactor conferring a privilege. This profound shift in identity is what ultimately commands respect, high compensation, and the willing cooperation of the world. It proves that the most difficult, the most crucial, and the most rewarding sale anyone will ever make is the sale they make to themselves. The art of selling oneself does not conclude with the signing of a contract or the acceptance of an offer, in truth. That is merely the opening act. The narrative follows the trajectory of those rare individuals who understand the principle of rendering more service than that for which they are paid. Imagine a clerk situated in the bleak, monotonous bowels of a massive corporate bureaucracy. He is paid a meager sum to perform a highly specific, mind-numbing task. The vast majority of his peers operate under the strict, resentful philosophy of doing exactly what is required and not a single motion more, jealously guarding their time as if the employer is an adversary to be outsmarted. They are entirely oblivious to the fact that they are constantly advertising their own stagnation. The clerk who masters the art of life, however, views his low position not as a prison cell, but as a heavily subsidized training ground. He arrives earlier than demanded and departs later than expected. He absorbs the mechanisms of the departments surrounding his own. He anticipates the needs of his superiors, solving complex problems before they ever reach the desks of management. He is not merely performing a job, he is executing a continuous, aggressive marketing campaign for his own future advancement. He understands the profound law of increasing returns. The analysis of this continuous effort uncovers the secret to exponential growth in any career or endeavor. The lesson is that compensation eventually, and inevitably, catches up to the true value of the service rendered. By deliberately delivering in excess of value, the individual creates a psychological debt in the minds of their superiors and the marketplace at large. They become entirely conspicuous, standing out violently against the gray background of average effort. This habit of going the extra mile annihilates competition. Because the masses are fundamentally lazy and obsessed with immediate gratification, the master salesperson of personal services knows that while you can be easily replaced if you only do what you are told, you become absolutely indispensable when you consistently deliver the miraculous. They are not waiting for a promotion to do better work, they are doing the better work to compel the universe to provide the promotion. This relentless, proactive service is the ultimate pitch, an unspoken argument that proves their worth with irrefutable, undeniable actions. The transition from individual effort to the orchestration of collective genius marks the true ascension of the master salesperson. The individual who has conquered their own internal doubts and established the habit of going the extra mile soon realizes that their singular capacity is severely limited by the physical constraints of time and energy. To achieve monumental success, one must not only sell their services to a willing buyer but must also sell an impossible vision to a reluctant team. The narrative shifts from the solitary clerk to the towering, controversial figure of Henry Ford, a man who understood that the ultimate sale is the transfer of unwavering faith into the minds of skeptics. The scene unfolds in the austere, grease-stained drafting rooms of the Ford Motor Company, where the atmosphere is thick with tension and the smell of ozone. Ford, driven by a relentless, almost tyrannical vision of automotive supremacy, has commanded his top engineers to design an engine block featuring 8 cylinders cast in a single, solid piece of metal. This is the legendary V8, a concept so radical, so theoretically absurd at the time, that the brightest mechanical minds on his payroll unanimously declare it an absolute impossibility. They present him with reams of calculations, metallurgical analyses, and irrefutable, logical proofs that what he is asking for cannot be done without the engine block fracturing under its own thermal stress. They are selling him failure, backed by the authority of science. But Ford is the master salesperson of reality itself. He does not argue with their mathematics, he simply refuses to buy their limitations. He looks at these brilliant men, the very experts he hired for their knowledge, and he commands them to produce it anyway, regardless of the cost, regardless of the time, and regardless of their deeply held convictions. He tells them to stay on the job until they succeed. Months bleed into a year of agonizing, expensive, and demoralizing failures. The engineers return to Ford, their faces etched with the exhaustion of repeated defeat, to report that the V8 is a phantom, a mechanical delusion. Yet, Ford's response is an unyielding wall of certainty. He orders them back to the drawing board. He is not merely managing a project, he is systematically breaking down their psychological barriers. He is selling them his absolute refusal to compromise. Finally, through the sheer, gravitational pull of his unbending will, the impossible yields. A breakthrough occurs, the casting holds, and the V8 engine is born, securing Ford's dominance in the industry and cementing his legacy as a titan of innovation. The profound analysis of Ford's uncompromising stance reveals the very essence of leadership as the highest, most potent form of salesmanship. The lesson extracted from this metallurgical triumph is that the master salesperson does not accept the reality presented to them by the world. They impose their internal reality upon the world. Ford did not know how to build the V8 engine. His genius lay in his ability to sell the necessity of its existence to the men who possessed the technical skill. He utilized the mastermind principle, not by coddling his team, but by establishing a standard of expectation so intensely high that it forced their minds to operate on a completely different frequency of problem solving. It demonstrates that logic is often the enemy of greatness. If Ford had bought the logical arguments of his engineers, he would have remained ordinary. Instead, he understood that to achieve the extraordinary, one must learn to sell a state of positive obsession to those who are constrained by conventional wisdom. The leader sells the destination, not the map, and demands that the followers discover the route through sheer necessity. This psychological pressure cooker is where miracles are forged, proving that human potential expands only when it is cornered by an unyielding demand for excellence. Having mastered the art of selling a vision to collaborators, the master salesperson must then navigate the treacherous, labyrinthine corridors of the buyer's mind. The narrative descends into the psychological anatomy of the prospect, a complex matrix of hidden desires, unspoken fears, and irrational impulses that dictate every decision a human being makes. The book identifies 9 basic motives that govern all human action, and the master salesperson approaches these motives not as abstract concepts, but as the literal strings of a grand, psychological instrument. Imagine a seasoned negotiator sitting across a vast mahogany desk from a wealthy, guarded prospect. To the amateur, the prospect appears as an impenetrable fortress of wealth and skepticism, armed with objections and a natural inclination to say no. But the master salesperson sees entirely through this facade. They understand that beneath the tailored suit and the cold demeanor beats a heart driven by the desperate, primal urge for self-preservation, the intoxicating desire for financial gain, or the secret, burning wish for social recognition. The master does not begin by extolling the virtues of their product. That would be a fatal error, an assault on the fortress walls. Instead, they begin a subtle, probing conversation, a reconnaissance mission designed to uncover which of the 9 motives is currently dominant in the prospect's psyche. Perhaps the prospect is driven by the fear of poverty, a lingering ghost from a childhood of deprivation. The master senses this subtle vibration, the slight hesitation in the voice when risk is mentioned. They immediately pivot their presentation, framing their service not as a mechanism for aggressive growth, but as an impenetrable shield against loss. A fortress of absolute security. The product remains the same, but the psychological packaging is completely transformed to perfectly align with the buyer's deepest, most agonizing fear. Alternatively, the prospect might be driven by the motive of love, the desire to provide an unassailable legacy for their family, or the motive of self-expression, the hunger to be recognized as a pioneer in their field. The analysis of this delicate operation reveals that selling is not an act of coercion. It is an act of extreme empathy coupled with strategic alignment. The lesson learned is that nobody buys a product, they buy the satisfaction of a motive. The person who sells drills is not selling pieces of metal, they are selling the hole in the wall. And more importantly, they are selling the beautiful painting that will hang on that wall, which in turn satisfies the motive for aesthetic pleasure or social prestige. The master salesperson must become a fluid, adaptable mirror, reflecting the buyer's deepest desires back to them in the form of the proposed transaction. When the offering is perfectly harmonized with the dominant motive, the resistance of the prospect evaporates like mist under a blazing sun. The prospect ceases to feel like they are being sold and instead feels a profound sense of relief, as if they have finally encountered someone who truly understands the silent language of their soul. This is the alchemy of persuasion, transforming a commercial transaction into an emotionally satisfying resolution of a deep-seated human need. As the master salesperson navigates these complex human interactions, they are acutely aware that their most precious inventory is not their product, nor their service, but the fleeting, irreversible passage of their own time. The narrative shifts to examine the architecture of a successful life through the lens of time management, an area where the vast majority of humanity suffers total, invisible bankruptcy. The average person squanders their time with the reckless abandon of a drunkard in a casino, trading hours of their irreplaceable life for mindless entertainment, toxic gossip, or paralyzing worry. They view time as an infinite resource, an endless river that will constantly replenish itself. The master, however, views time with a terrifying clarity. They understand that time is the only true capital any human being possesses at birth. And it is the only asset that cannot be multiplied, borrowed, or retrieved once spent. Every day is a ledger, and every hour is a forced investment. The individual who masters their fate audits their 24 hours with the ruthlessness of a predatory banker. They divide their day into strict compartments: time for concentrated, aggressive labor, time for physical and mental recuperation, and most importantly, time for deliberate, strategic planning. They do not allow the emergencies of others to hijack their schedule. They say no with a chilling frequency, fiercely guarding the gates of their attention against the endless siege of distractions that the modern world deploys to keep the masses in a state of perpetual, unproductive motion. The profound lesson extracted from this temporal discipline is that you cannot sell your way to greatness if you have already given away your life force to the trivialities of the crowd. The analysis dictates that the way a person manages their time is the exact physical manifestation of their internal sense of self-worth. If you sell your time cheaply to meaningless activities, you are subconsciously signaling to the universe that your existence has a low market value. The master salesperson treats their time as a luxury commodity. When they dedicate an hour to a prospect, a project, or a book, they do so with absolute, undivided intensity, wringing every ounce of value from those 60 minutes. This extreme concentration creates a density of experience that accelerates their progress exponentially. While the average person spends a decade making a modest advancement, the master achieves the same result in a year, simply by eliminating the dead time that pollutes the lives of the undisciplined. They realize that success is not the result of a single, monumental event, but the cumulative, compound interest of thousands of small, perfectly executed hours. Yet, even with perfect time management, unyielding self-suggestion, and a masterful understanding of human motives, the journey of selling one's way through life is destined to collide with the brutal, shattering force of defeat. The narrative turns to the darkest chapters of the human experience, the moments when the master salesperson faces total, catastrophic failure. The business collapses, the most important prospect walks away, the market shifts violently, or a trusted ally betrays the cause. To the ordinary mind, defeat is a final verdict, a cruel judgment from a hostile universe that signals the end of the road. The defeated individual internalizes the failure, allowing it to poison their identity. Retreating into the comforting, numb embrace of victimhood, they sell themselves on the idea that they were never meant to succeed. But the master approaches defeat with a radically different, almost alien psychology. They do not welcome pain, but they recognize it as the harsh, unforgiving furnace where true resilience is forged. They understand the fundamental law that every adversity, every failure, and every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. When the master salesperson is knocked to the canvas, bleeding and breathless, they do not ask the universe for pity. Instead, they interrogate the failure with the cold, detached precision of an autopsy. They dissect the catastrophe to extract the hidden lesson, the crucial piece of intelligence that was previously invisible. The analysis of this reaction to failure reveals the ultimate secret of the invincible mind. The lesson is that failure is an illusion created by a lack of perspective. It is merely a temporary detour on the road to a larger victory. The master salesperson realizes that the marketplace is constantly testing their resolve, probing their defenses to see if their faith is genuine or merely a convenient posture. When they rise from the ashes of a ruined enterprise, they do so not with diminished enthusiasm, but with a terrifying, refined focus. They have paid the tuition of pain, and they intend to collect the dividend of wisdom. They take the energy of their frustration and channel it into a renewed, more intelligent assault on their goals. This ability to transmute the lead of failure into the gold of a new strategy is what makes them truly unstoppable. They understand that no one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality in their own mind. By refusing to buy the concept of permanent failure, they continuously reinvent themselves, presenting to the world an ever-evolving, increasingly formidable version of their personal services. They become a living testament to the truth that the human spirit, when fueled by a definite purpose and a mastery of persuasion, can outlast any storm, overcome any obstacle, and sell its way to the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. The sheer velocity of the master's recovery is not accidental, it is engineered through the relentless application of personal initiative. The narrative highlights that the world is filled with brilliant individuals who possess vast reservoirs of knowledge. Yet they remain paralyzed by hesitation. They wait for the perfect moment, the ideal economic climate, or the elusive guarantee of safety before they dare to launch their ambitions. They are attempting to sell a ship that never leaves the harbor. The master salesperson, conversely, is defined by an explosive bias toward action. They do not wait for opportunities to knock, they dismantle the door and build their own entrance. When confronted with a stagnant career or a failing venture, they do not seek permission to innovate. They seize the initiative, launching daring, uninvited proposals and creating entirely new markets where none previously existed. They understand that motion creates emotion, and that taking decisive, immediate action generates the very confidence needed to sustain the campaign. This aggressive pursuit of progress creates a magnetic field of momentum. People, capital, and serendipitous events are naturally drawn to the individual who is moving with ferocious, undeniable purpose. The analysis of this trait demonstrates that initiative is the spark that ignites the engine of success. Without it, the greatest ideas and the most profound understanding of human psychology remain dormant, lifeless potentials. The lesson is that the universe rewards the bold, not the cautious. The act of selling one's way through life demands the courage to step into the void, to present one's value before it is asked for, and to force the world to react to one's presence. It is a psychological dominance established not through arrogance, but through the undeniable, relentless rhythm of execution. The master salesperson knows that a flawed plan executed with violent enthusiasm today is infinitely superior to a perfect plan executed tomorrow. They trade the illusion of perfection for the undeniable reality of progress, continuously throwing themselves into the arena, knowing that every interaction, every presentation, and every rejection is sharpening their blade for the ultimate conquest. The unyielding rhythm of execution inevitably propels the master salesperson from the chaotic battlefield of the marketplace into the most intimate, heavily fortified, and profound arena of human existence, the domestic sphere. The narrative shifts its intense gaze to the institution of marriage, a partnership that the vast majority of society fatally misinterprets as a romantic conclusion rather than the beginning of the most complex, high-stakes sales campaign of a lifetime. The tragic, common archetype is the individual who expends massive amounts of energy, charm, and strategic persuasion during the courtship phase, presenting an idealized, flawless version of their character to secure the agreement. However, the moment the contract of marriage is sealed, a catastrophic psychological complacency sets in. The amateur salesperson ceases to sell. They drop the facade of consideration. They abandon the habit of going the extra mile, and they revert to their base, unpolished nature, foolishly believing that the legal or spiritual bond is a permanent guarantee of affection and loyalty. The master, conversely, approaches the marital alliance with the terrifying, unending vigilance of a seasoned diplomat. They understand that the spouse is the most important prospect they will ever encounter. And the daily maintenance of that relationship requires a continuous, exquisite application of all 9 fundamental motives. They do not take the affection of their partner for granted, they actively resell themselves every single morning. They anticipate the emotional needs of their spouse. They navigate the treacherous waters of domestic conflict with the delicate touch of a master negotiator. And they consistently deliver in excess of value, ensuring that the partnership remains a source of profound, mutual enrichment rather than a prison of resentful obligation. The profound analysis of this intimate dynamic reveals the ultimate truth about human relationships. Love, respect, and loyalty are never permanently owned, they are rented. And the rent is due every single day. The lesson extracted from the high failure rate of marriages is that human beings are fundamentally motivated by their own happiness. And the moment a partnership ceases to provide that happiness, the foundation begins to crumble. The master salesperson understands that the harmony of the home is the absolute bedrock upon which all external success is built. If the domestic environment is a war zone of neglected emotions and bitter resentments, the individual's psychological energy is drained, leaving them weak and vulnerable in the professional arena. By applying the principles of salesmanship, empathy, active listening, the anticipation of needs, and the continuous presentation of one's best self, the master secures an impenetrable fortress of support. This internal harmony acts as a massive multiplier of their external effectiveness, proving that the most lucrative and vital negotiations are not conducted in corporate boardrooms, but across the breakfast table. The psychological mastery required to maintain a thriving, passionate, and cooperative marriage is the exact same mastery required to build a financial empire, demonstrating that the laws of persuasion are universal and absolutely inescapable. As the master salesperson secures their domestic foundation and accelerates their professional ascent, they encounter the terrifying, seductive distraction of scattered opportunities. The narrative introduces the concept of intense, singular concentration, a mental discipline that separates the titans of industry from the brilliant but ultimately ineffective dreamers. The world is filled with individuals who possess a vast array of talents. Yet they achieve nothing of significance because they spread their energy across a dozen different, unrelated pursuits. They are like a weak, diffused light bulb that barely illuminates a small room. The master, however, is a psychological magnifying glass. They take the raw, burning energy of their definite major purpose and focus it relentlessly onto a single, microscopic point until it ignites a raging inferno of success. They do not dabble, they obsess. The story follows the trajectory of a specialist who ignores the endless, tantalizing siren songs of alternative investments, side hustles, and unrelated hobbies. This individual channels every waking hour, every ounce of their intellectual capital, and every unit of their emotional bandwidth into mastering one specific, highly valuable niche. They become the undisputed authority, the absolute pinnacle of their chosen field. The marketplace, which is utterly indifferent to the jack of all trades, furiously rewards the master of one. The sheer, gravitational mass of their concentrated expertise begins to warp the fabric of their industry, pulling the most lucrative opportunities, the most powerful allies, and the most desperate buyers directly into their orbit. The analysis of this singular focus exposes the fatal flaw of the modern, distracted mind. The lesson is that extraordinary success demands an almost fanatical level of specialization and an absolute refusal to be diverted from the primary objective. The master salesperson understands that human energy is a finite resource, and every time it is divided, its penetrating power is exponentially reduced. By committing to a life of intense concentration, the individual develops a depth of knowledge and a refinement of skill that renders them completely immune to ordinary competition. They are no longer selling a commodity, they are selling a monopoly of expertise. This level of focus requires a brutal, unsentimental auditing of one's daily activities, ruthlessly eliminating anything that does not directly contribute to the realization of the central goal. The psychological tension created by this extreme concentration is immense, but it is the very pressure required to forge the diamond of unparalleled achievement. The master knows that the world will always attempt to dilute their purpose, and their greatest defense is the terrifying, unyielding power of a single, magnificent obsession. They understand that selling your way through life is not a sprint of scattered energy, but a marathon of unbroken, concentrated will. Yet, all the concentration, initiative, and psychological manipulation in the world will ultimately lead to ruin if it is not anchored to the profound, immutable law of mutual benefit. The narrative approaches the ethical zenith of the philosophy, the absolute necessity of the golden rule in all human transactions. The story paints a dark, cautionary portrait of the brilliant, ruthless manipulator who uses their deep understanding of human motives to exploit the weaknesses of others. They achieve a rapid, meteoric rise to wealth, leaving a trail of broken promises, ruined partners, and bitter victims in their wake. They believe they have outsmarted the universe, but the narrative reveals the silent, inescapable machinery of cosmic justice. The wealth acquired through deception and exploitation is toxic. It rots the soul and breeds a suffocating, paranoid isolation. The victims of the manipulator eventually unite. The reputation of the exploiters turns to ash, and the empire built on fraud inevitably collapses under the weight of its own karmic debt. The master salesperson, observing this tragedy, operates on a completely different, infinitely more powerful frequency. They recognize that the golden rule, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, is not merely a moral platitude for Sunday school. It is the most ruthless, effective, and sustainable business strategy ever devised. They refuse to participate in any transaction where all parties do not emerge enriched. They sell products and services that deliver far more value than the price demanded. They build their empires not on the defeat of their rivals, but on the profound, enthusiastic satisfaction of their clients. They understand that true wealth is the byproduct of adding massive, undeniable value to the lives of others, creating a permanent, invisible bond of loyalty and gratitude. The analysis of this ethical framework reveals that trust is the ultimate, indestructible currency of the human experience. The lesson extracted from the Golden Rule is that you cannot sustainably sell your way through life by creating losers. You must architect a continuous series of victories for everyone you encounter. The master salesperson understands that a satisfied customer is not just a source of revenue, they are an unpaid, fiercely loyal ambassador who will aggressively market the master's services to the world. By operating with absolute integrity and a genuine desire to elevate others, the individual taps into the deepest, most powerful motive of all, the human craving for authentic, benevolent connection. This ethical alignment creates a fortress of goodwill that protects the master during economic downturns and accelerates their rise during periods of prosperity. The marketplace eventually recognizes and aggressively rewards the individual who proves, through consistent action, that their primary motive is the rendering of exceptional, honest service. The true master does not merely close a sale. They open a lifelong relationship built on the unshakable foundation of mutual trust and respect. They prove that morality and extreme financial success are not mutually exclusive, but are in fact deeply, permanently intertwined forces that multiply one another when applied with conscious, deliberate intent. As the various threads of this grand philosophy weave together, the complete, awe-inspiring tapestry of the master salesperson is finally revealed. They are not merely an individual who exchanges goods for money. They are a psychological titan who has conquered their own internal limitations and mastered the invisible forces that drive human behavior. The narrative synthesizes the critical elements: the unwavering, synthesized confidence born of relentless autosuggestion, the meticulous, almost predatory management of time, the bold, uninvited initiation of action, the empathetic, strategic manipulation of the 9 basic human motives, the intense, laser-like concentration of energy, and the absolute, unwavering commitment to the Golden Rule. When these forces are combined, they create an individual who is literally unstoppable. They move through the world with a calm, terrifying certainty, bending circumstances to their will not through force, but through the irresistible gravity of their optimized character. The world steps aside for this individual, not out of fear, but out of a profound, instinctual recognition of their superior alignment with the fundamental laws of success. They do not suffer the indignities of a mediocre existence because they have systematically engineered their own reality. Proving that destiny is not a matter of chance, but a matter of choice, discipline, and the relentless, daily execution of the perfect pitch. This is the ultimate ascension of the human spirit, taking complete, unapologetic ownership of one's fate through the mastery of influence, persuasion, and unyielding service. The journey of the master is a continuous, upward spiral of increasing power, expanding influence, and deepening fulfillment, forever leaving behind the agonizing, crowded valleys of the uninspired masses. They understand that every rejection, every setback, and every moment of doubt was simply a necessary crucible designed to burn away the impurities of their character, leaving only the pure, indestructible steel of their awakened will. The life of the master salesperson becomes a living, breathing testament to the boundless capacity of the human mind to construct a paradise out of the very materials that others use to build their own prisons. They navigate the shifting, turbulent tides of the global economy with the serene confidence of a captain who completely trusts the structural integrity of their vessel, knowing that no external storm can ever breach the heavily guarded citadel of their cultivated mind. They embody the ultimate realization that the world is a mirror, perfectly reflecting back the exact level of value, conviction, and service that one is willing to passionately project into it. The core message and profound meaning that this book intends to convey to its readers is that the entirety of human life is a continuous, high-stakes negotiation, and your ultimate success, wealth, and happiness are strictly determined by your ability to effectively sell your ideas, your services, and your personality to the world. It strips away the comforting illusions of luck and entitlement, replacing them with the cold, empowering reality that you are the sole architect of your value. The book demands that the reader cease operating as a passive victim of circumstance and instead adopt the aggressive, strategic, and empathetic mindset of the master salesperson, understanding that the universe yields its greatest treasures only to those who possess the psychological fortitude to persuade it. You are not defined by your past, your education, or your current limitations. You are defined exclusively by your ability to package your potential and confidently demand exactly what you want from life. It teaches that the highest form of living is not merely surviving, but masterfully orchestrating the perceptions and desires of humanity to create a magnificent, abundant reality for oneself and others. The philosophy presented within these pages is not merely a collection of business tactics, but a profound, spiritual blueprint for total human emancipation. It reveals that the chains of poverty, obscurity, and unfulfillment are entirely self-forged, created by an agonizing failure to recognize and deploy the innate power of persuasion that slumbers within every human heart. To read this book and remain unchanged is to willingly accept a life of quiet desperation. But to internalize its teachings is to awaken a dormant giant, ready to seize the immense, limitless riches that the world eagerly hands to anyone who knows precisely how to ask for them. The ultimate triumph is the realization that you are the product, you are the pitch, and you are the closing argument in the supreme courtroom of human existence. The only difference between the architect of a magnificent destiny and the victim of a miserable fate is the quality of the sale they make to themselves and the world around them.